Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Vulture's Rainbow Theatre. I am your warm and charming host, Mr. Damon Vulture, and it is my pleasure to introduce a new writer to our growing circle of creative minds here in the Vulture's Rainbow family. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce Mr. Alberto Zopilote. Thank you, Damon. This evening, I will be bringing you a story from the south of Texas, down near the border with Mexico. But I must warn you that if you follow me to the end of this narrative, you may find yourself looking over your shoulder again and again for something you will have sworn was there. May I present, for your pleasure, this tale of the strange and inexplicable La Catrina. Down in South Texas, right along the Mexican border, runs U.S. Highway 83. And just before you get to the town of Santo Inigo, there is a dance hall, a ballroom called El Cafetal. There's not much to it really. It's a big cinder block building with a rusty tin roof and a kind of parking lot which is mostly little weeds and gravel mixed together. Here and there around the building there are big palm trees that are as close to dead as they can get. Their dry brown and green leaves blowing in the summer wind when the people who live near there are lucky enough to have a breeze. Like I say, it doesn't look like much most of the time. But on some Friday and Saturday nights, people will drive in from as far away as McAllen or Del Rio for some of the big dances they have out there. Because the place is something of a legend with many, many stories of my people attached to it, even famous bands have played there from time to time. On the light green and red walls inside, you will find photographs of little Joe y la Familia, of Selena, of Los Temerarios. Even one night when I was there, when Maná played, I remember it especially well because it was the last night I danced with a girl I planned to marry. But right after Maná played Mariposa Traicionera, she called me outside into the parking lot, and there, under the dark sky and a million stars, she told me that there was someone else, and that we should say goodbye. But that is not the story I wanted to tell you at this moment, although it has everything to do with this little yarn of mine. I wanted to tell you the story of one of the things that makes El Cafetal so famous, one of the legends that has put this ballroom on the map, even though it is 100 miles from God and any town of decent size. Once upon a time in Mexico, when it was ruled by El Presidente Porfirio Diaz, there was an artist by the name of José Guadalupe Posada. You may not recognize the name, but you have seen his work. For Posada came to draw and paint pictures only of esqueletos, of calacas, of skeletons, dressed in the clothing of peasants and businessmen and politicians, and the rich people who lived in Mexico on the backs of los pobres y los campesinos in the days of the Porfiriato. One of his pictures has become especially famous, so much so that it ended up in a popular card game called Loteria. It was his picture of a rich lady with a big hat full of flowers and feathers, and the white, dead skull face of a calaca. Later on, another famous artist by the name of Diego Rivera put her in one of his paintings wearing the same hat and dressed in a long, pale gown. Others have since painted her or drawn her, adding roses to her hair, changing the form of her face, and granting her a rich wardrobe of many gowns and many colors. But I am here to tell you something There is only one color in the gown that she wears. It is red, a red the color of fresh blood. You may well ask how I know this. It is because I have seen her with my own eyes. After all this glorious history of El Cafetal with which I have regaled you, it may surprise you to learn that most Friday and Saturday nights are much quieter affairs, where less illustrious musicians ply their trade and provide the dance music for the locals. The band which appears most often these days, Los Palominos Azules, is pretty good. Most of the time when they play, it sounds just like the recordings from which they learned. But the vocals can sometimes leave a little bit to be desired. You can learn to play a guitar real nice and still not be able to hit the pitch with your voice. You know what I am saying. I had not been going to El Cafetal for some time after Araceli dismissed me from her life. In fact, I had grown increasingly despondent, and even I lost my job because I was missing days and staying home sick when really I was just sad and felt like I wanted to do nothing else but lie down and die. Even because of this, I bought a pistola and a box of bullets, which I kept in the bottom drawer of my dresser, underneath a folded pile of sweaters I never wear except maybe once a year when we get a day cold enough to put one on. I told myself the gun was for self-defense if someone tried to rob my house. But sometimes I remembered what I had really bought it for. In case the pain of losing Araceli became so bad that the only cure for it might be to sleep forever. One night, I found myself sitting on the side of my bed looking at the dresser drawer, thinking that maybe now was the time. I had just about made up my mind when it came to me that maybe I should get out of the house for a while, to let the issue percolate until I was absolutely sure it was time to make my exit from this life of sorrow and end my dolor forever. So I got up and put on some clothes and I drove my pickup over to El Cafetal. Who knows, I thought to myself, maybe I will find a girl there. Maybe I will dance and forget my troubles for a while, and maybe I might stick around for a few more days. It was all the hope I had. Outside in the parking lot, you could hear the thump of bass and drum and sometimes the trill of the concertina. There wasn't a lot of outside light, so I had to pick my way slowly around the parked cars and trucks, while crickets chirped and stars twinkled, and out-of-tune voices broke into the thump-thump of the dance music. Ay, 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 mi amor, a voice sang, and I stopped for a moment to swallow the bitter blackness which welled out from my heart as my memory was forced by the words of that song back to that fateful night in this very same place. Why had I come here, I asked myself. It had for sure been a stupid idea. When I came in, the place wasn't empty, but it was mostly locals. Only 3 couples were on the dance floor in the dim-colored light that moved around its polished surface of cracked concrete. The bar was in the back against the far wall, almost in the dark, and around it stood an army of tables and chairs to which the weary could retreat to drink their margaritas, enchiladas, their cervezas and sotoles. That's where I was headed. There would be, as far as I could see, no free women to ask for a dance, and so, if that consolation was to be denied me, then I would find my solace in the world of spirits. Whatever spirits they had on the shelves behind the bar. Rigoberto Rodriguez, a short, round man about the age of my father had he lived, was running the bar this night, seeing where to put things and reach for bottles by a small shaded lamp he kept behind the counter. where it would not detract from the drama of near darkness which gave the seedy interior of El Cafetal a certain glamour it would otherwise not have possessed. "Alberto," he called out when I sat down in one of the stools right there at the bar. "It's been a real long time since you came out here," he said. "That's conversation for you. Sometimes you have to start it by saying the obvious." "I will tell you something, Rigo," I said, leaning over the counter to make myself better heard over the cumbia music coming from those palominos azules across the ballroom. "I'm at the end of my rope," I told him. "How about you just take down a bottle of that Bombay gin and put my name on it? I guarantee you I will finish it tonight." "That's a really bad idea, Este," he said. "Hey, it's my money becoming your money," I said back. "3 drinks, that's it," he said. "Then you gotta do something else." "Any recommendations?" I asked. He didn't say anything, but he did gesture with his eyes toward a door marked Caballeros in the darkest corner of the ballroom beyond the bar. "Midnight," he said. Now to you I am sure this sounds pretty mysterious. The men's bathroom door and the word midnight. But if you lived around here, what Rigo said was a mouthful. You remember how I said that Jose Guadalupe Posada had drawn a picture once, a long time ago, of a rich woman with the skull face of a calaca? If you Google this picture of La Catrina and find the history of the image, it will tell you that Posada made this picture up to make fun of the people who were getting rich on the backs of the poor during the time of the Porfiriato in Mexico. But people around here know differently. Posada didn't invent La Catrina. She was already around. What he drew was not from imagination. It was from memory. Posada had come north over the Rio Bravo during the Guerra Civil, the civil war which came to Mexico in 1910. In 1912 he was working for some newspaper and he came to make illustrations to go with the news on the progress and doings of the Maderistas, and also to see the other side, to see what the Americanos were doing on their end of all the commotion and disorder of those times. There was no El Cafetal in those days, but there was a cantina which stood on the same spot, about where the men's restroom is today. According to what I have been told, Posada had gone to the cantina to have a few drinks with some of the local rancheros, the hombres de negocios, to hear their stories about the fighting which was pouring across the border, and just to see the local color of the place. According to what I heard, about midnight he went outside to find the outhouse, but the door to the Jakes was locked from the inside, occupied. He could barely see out there, so the story tells, because all the light there was came from an oil lamp hanging from a beam on the porch of the cantina. Posada, who had an urgent need to relieve himself, walked into the darkness, unbuttoned his trousers in front, and standing there, began to answer the call of nature. But there in the shadows thrown by the building, there in the dark under the stars, Posada said he saw something bright and splendiferous out of the corner of his left eye. He would not turn to look directly at it, for this would have involved a great immodesty, even in the darkness, and so he remained where he stood, trying to catch a glimpse out of his left eye. What he saw, or what he thought he saw, was a beautiful red dress, the color of fresh blood, shining in the darkness with its own interior light. And above that, a graceful throat, and the white bony skull of a human calavera. And Posada swears he saw the magnificent wide hat, with its shining turquoise border of silk fringe, and its gathering of brightly colored flowers, and its double grace of twin ostrich feathers. "Ay, perdon, senora," he said. "I hope you will excuse me." And then, after having buttoned his pants, he turned, but there was no one there. But the image, imperfectly seen, had burned itself on his left eye, so Posada said. And he did not sleep that night, staying up until dawn to draw one picture after another of this creature, La Catrina, the very image of the promise of death offered in the midst of young, lusty, and opulent life. And it is perhaps no accident that Posada died in the following year after this vision. So I knew what Rigo was suggesting. It has been said that the vision of La Catrina stayed with Posada when he returned to Mexico, and that he was haunted thereafter by her appearances, until La Muerte claimed him. For again and again he would see her, but never directly, and only when he was alone. Posada had seen death, and died a few months later from the vision. But others, since then, reported seeing La Catrina in the same place, and not all of them suffered such a fate. Some there were who claimed that over time and with great reflection, wisdom came to them from this vision, a transformative wisdom for which they were forever grateful. Who knows, Rigo was saying. At midnight, maybe I would have this good fortune if I went to the door marked Caballeros, to the place where she appeared. Knowing as I did that the vision of La Catrina affects a man according to his character and intentions, I realized that two possibilities lay open to me. For if I saw her, either death would come for me as it had for Posada, or I would be healed and transformed, and life could go on, perhaps without such pain. Either way, it seemed to me that I had nothing to lose. It was the custom, just before midnight, for the band to strike up an anthem it had gleaned from a group called Los Ángeles Azules, a song they used to sing called Como Te Voy Olvidar. And when I heard the concertina play the figure that precedes the first verse of the song, I rose and made my unsteady way toward El Baño de Caballeros. I had had my 3 drinks, and this visit to the men's room was my last option. When I came inside, I saw that the place was deserted. To my left ran the long row of steel doors which opened onto a long row of unoccupied toilets, and on my right there ran a row of sinks and mirrors. On the back wall there was a line of urinals fastened to a wall of ornate Spanish tile, and it was to them that I proceeded. As I pulled down the zipper of my trousers and gazed at the intricate Moorish designs on the tiles in front of me, I realized that I felt rather skeptical that such an event would occur as the appearance of La Catrina. After all, who was I but a carpenter and sometimes a pipe feeder, who lived alone in an old house he had inherited from his late father, who had no wife, no family, and no prospects for advancement in the world. But as I stood there for a moment in the relative quiet, the sound of the band playing only a faint and distant background noise, I heard the clopping report of hard soles and hard heels on the concrete floor of that restroom. Like Posada, I wanted to turn at this impression of a visitor behind my back, but I did not dare to do so because of the immodesty I would have to risk in doing so, for my answer to the call of nature had not yet run its course. And then, just inside the corner of my left eye, I saw the flash of red, bright red, the color of blood, but with a shine to it, as it would have on a fabric such as expensive silk. And against this sheen of crimson, there were flashes of white, of a long string of white pearls in a necklace, and a white face of bone, from which gazed the double, dark, circular orbits in which the lucid eyes of a young woman had once gazed. Like Posada, I too saw, or thought I caught a glimpse of the big hat with its turquoise fringe, its flowers, its feathers. A beauty from a bygone age, reduced to a bleached skeleton in finery, a calaca risen from the grave to make an appearance in this undignified and unhallowed place, the men's restroom of El Cafetal. Unlike Posada, I did not attempt an apology, for it had been my intention that she should appear and catch me as she had caught the artist, and it was my hope that from this apparition should come either death, as it had come for the artist, or an insight from beyond the grave that might save and transform me, that life might go on. And as long as I stood there serving the needs of the body, the apparition remained silent as a tombstone in the grass of a graveyard. But when I had tugged my zipper up and turned to face the great expanse of the men's room of El Cafetal, I found that the place was empty. There was nothing and nobody. I washed my hands and made for the door, emerging once again into the near darkness of the ballroom, where Los Palominos Azules continued to play for the few couples who had come out that night, where Rigo continued his work at the bar, wiping down its surface, placing glasses back on the shelves, returning the bottle of gin from which I had taken my 3 drinks. All the tables were empty, and I threaded my way through them back out the double doors of El Cafetal and into the night of South Texas. You know how sometimes you get this feeling that you are being followed, or that there is someone just behind you whom you believe that you saw moving, but then you turn and he is not there, there is no one there. Well, that's how it was with me. When I drove home in my pickup down the dark roads to my house in Santo Inigo, I felt sure that I had a passenger in the front seat, for I would catch the flash of movement in the corner of my eye, and I could swear I heard the rustling of silk, the snapping shut of a compact, the metal lid snapped back into place on lipstick. But if I turned my head, the passenger seat was empty. And when I came home and stripped down to my shorts for bed, and moved about the house checking the windows in the rooms that they were shut, and the outside doors to make sure they were locked, I saw nothing. But it seemed to me that there were flashes of movement behind me, just within view, but not quite. I thought of leaving on the light on my nightstand, but I was not sure if I wanted to see this apparition clearly illuminated, or whether it might be better to see this phantasma obscured by the darkness. Eventually I turned off the light and lay on my back in the bed, the covers over me, looking up at the ceiling, feeling that if I turned my head down so I could see the room, I would see standing in the open bedroom door the shadowy form of La Catrina, her white fleshless face reflecting dimly the light which came now and again through windows from the headlights of a passing car. But when I did look, there was nothing. And so now the months have passed, a couple of years, and here I am, still living. What can I say? Before I went that night to El Cafetal, I felt all alone in the world. It seemed to me that nothing lay ahead but emptiness and loneliness and pain. But the vision in the Baño de Caballeros has made some kind of a difference. I noticed this the very next morning, for I found myself feeling hopeful about the future again. I even sang Mariposa Traicionera under my breath while I made the morning coffee. And I danced around the table for a moment, my arms extended, as though embracing an imaginary, invisible woman. and I found that even when I saw in my mind's eye the face of my long-gone Araceli, that I could stand the pain, that I could even feel it lessening, flowing away slowly, very slowly, see, painfully, but leaving me. I have since found work, and though no one has come into my life to replace Araceli, I feel fine and hopeful about the future, and I am ready to proceed with the rest of my life. And you know, it doesn't even bother me that every night, and in every lonely place where no one is around, I can still see something out of the corner of my eye, a flash of movement, and I can hear now and again the sound of a sigh, the slide of the sole of a shoe on the floor, the creak of a chair. What is it, you may ask, that has made the difference? Well, maybe it's the thing that La Catrina has taught me, that however it may appear, I am no longer alone. You have been listening to Vulture's Rainbow Theatre. This is your host, Damon Vulture, wishing you good night and dark dreams.